Hi, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I'm a Danish book lover living in Spain, and this is my little corner of BookTube. So, as of today's date, we are officially in summer. It is the 1st of June, and that means we're leaving May behind, we're leaving spring behind, which is a little bit sad. But I've also been very much looking forward to summer and all of the books I'm planning on reading over the next couple of months. But before we do that, I thought let's wrap up May and go through the books that I read. So, I did end up reading 9 books in May, and I think out of those 9 books, only 2 of them were physical copies, whereas the rest of them I read on my Kindle. And we're gonna go through them in the order that I did read them. So let's go get ourselves a drink, let's get comfy, and let's find out what books I read in May and what I rated them. So as we entered May, I had just finished reading my April TBR list, which I did end up filming the whole process and what I thought about the books. And that video you can find at the top of your screen right now. But when I entered May, I was in the mood to go back to the Legacy of Gods series. I needed a little bit of dark romance. And so I went into the 4th book, which is called God of Ruin, which is Landon's book. And I was really excited to go into this one because during the first 3 books, we do meet Landon, we've met all of the characters that each has a book so far, but Landon, I didn't really like in the other books, and I think if you've read the series, you know why. So I was very intrigued, and also because the female main character was someone that we had been introduced to her, but we didn't really know anything of her, and we knew more of her twin sister that I very much did not like because of how she was in the book prior to this one. So I was very much intrigued going into this one, and I did end up rating this 4 stars. And I feel like looking back now, maybe my rating could have been a little bit lower purely because of the similarities and like the same sort of plot and setup as the other books. But I still very much enjoyed it, and in the moment, I did feel like it was a 4 star read because I did love it. So it's about Landon and it's about Mia, and similar to the other books, they don't really get along in the beginning. They're from the 2 rival colleges on the island, and Mia is Nikolai's sister, and Landon is obviously the leader of the Heathens. No, he is not. The elites? Yeah. And Landon is obviously one of the leaders of the elites, if not, he's like the main leader. And so Mia wants to revenge her brother from what happened to her brother in another book. And she goes and does a prank on Landon, and that's when their story starts. And then obviously a lot of stuff happens. I want this video to be spoiler free as much as possible, so I'm not going to say too much, but I will say that I did feel like this book was very repetitive from the other books. Like, it is more or less the same sort of plot line that they all deal with, but each character just have different trauma to deal with, basically. And I did really like the chemistry between Landon and Mia, and there's not much else to say. I did feel like it was worth the 4 stars. So yeah, so that was the first book I read in May, and I very much enjoyed it, and therefore I wanted to just continue the series. So it probably comes as no surprise that the next book I read was God of Fury, which is the next book in the Legacy of God series. And this is Nikolai's and Brandon's book. So this was my first romance book, dark romance, that I have ever read. And I didn't really know what to expect going into it, other than I knew that this book was highly praised. And for a lot of people, this is the favorite of the series. So I had high expectations, but at the same time, I didn't really know how I was going to feel with the book because, to be honest, in the other books, Nikolai wasn't really one of my favorite characters. So I didn't really know, like, I had high hopes, but at the same time, I didn't really. So anyways, without trying to spoil anything, this story is about Nikolai and Brandon. Nikolai is very openly bisexual, so he dates both women and men, and he's got basically someone in his bed every single night, and maybe not just one person, maybe several. And already from the beginning, you can tell he's got a very close relationship to his man part. he has a nickname for it. And opposite, we've got Brandon, who has only ever dated women. He's had a girlfriend on off for a couple of years, and he's very much not into men, is what he's trying to convince himself of. But then he meets Nikolai, and already from the beginning, Nikolai is very interested, and he can't really get it on with anyone else since Brandon has piqued his interest, basically. Whereas Brandon is so not interested in Nikolai. And so obviously their relationship starts developing, but the story is very much about how Brandon isn't ready to accept that he's into him, into a man, basically. And we also find out that Brandon has some very dark inner demons, which Nikolai also has, but in a different way, I would say. So obviously, which I feel like with all of the Legacy of Gods books, they do revolve around mental health, and especially in this book with Brandon and how bad he's actually got it. So I really, really liked that, and I loved the relationship between Nikolai and Brandon. But with that being said, I did end up rating this only 3.75 stars, which is still very, very good. It still means that it's a book I absolutely loved. I do think it's the lowest rating that I've given one of the books in this series, and that is purely because I felt like the author couldn't really figure out how she wanted Brandon to be. And I'm gonna try and explain it as best as I can, but I feel like with the way he's been portrayed in, like, majority in this book, but also in the previous books, is that he is a damaged person. Like, he obviously will put on a facade when he's out in the open, but you can tell that he's this calm guy, like he's the sensible out of him and Landon, and he's broken, basically. And a lot of his inner monologue was like that as well. Like, that's the impression you got of him as a person. But then sometimes when he was with Nikolai, it was very aggressive and like bad mouthing and stuff. And I know that you can be both ways, I suppose, like as a facade, exactly like as a facade or a shield or whatever. But I just felt like with the scenes where this sort of behavior came out, I just felt like this wasn't the person that we were, that we knew. So I just felt like that was very out of character for him, and it made me unsure of what sort of person he was meant to be portrayed, basically. And then also, I do feel like a lot of the plot line was the whiplash with, like, okay, now we're an item, okay, now we're not. Like, oh, I don't know. Oh, and I understand that that's probably very similar to how it is as someone coming out and not really understanding their sexuality. But I felt like this plot line was dragged out a little bit too much, where it was literally just. So that is the reason that it was only a 3.75 stars, but I still very much loved it, and I absolutely will read another romance. So okay, and then to finish off the Legacy of God series, I then went in with God of War, which is the final book of the series, and this is Eli and Ava's book. And I was a little bit worried going into this because I had seen a lot of reviews, and this covers amnesia, sort of thing, and obviously again a lot of mental health, but I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel with it being like with amnesia, because that's not really, it's hard to explain, but basically I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about that. But I ended up rating this 4.5 stars, and I absolutely loved it because it was different from the other books. Obviously still similar traits, but this was very different, to be honest, in the plot line. And I liked that it wasn't as much focus on like the spice. Don't get me wrong, there was still spice in there, but this was more about the plot. And obviously with the plot being between the two characters and what they're going through individually. But I don't know, I felt like it was just different. And I really liked the author putting focus on something that people don't really know much about, like Ava's illness. And I just thought this book was executed really, really well. And in the previous books, we know that there's like an underlying issue between Ava and Eli, but we can tell that they obviously still want each other. And still, I feel like not much is uncovered in the other books. Like, we don't really know anything about their story. So it was really nice to find out, and then to kind of move forward into the future and where they're married, basically, and then how that's working out. And she's slowly getting her memories back, and she's finding out these things that happened in her past. And eventually her going into like being put in a mental hospital and him still going to see her when she's sleeping. I don't know. Still, I'm trying not to give too many spoilers, but I just thought this book was absolutely amazing, and I do feel like you need to go into it with no expectations, because it's either going to be a book that you think is good, or it's going to be a book that you were like, what the you should give it a chance. Absolutely. If you're reading the series, get the last book as well, because I absolutely enjoyed it. So that was the end of the Legacy of God series, and from what I can remember now, it is a couple of months ago since I read the first three books, but if I need to say what my favorites were, it would be God of Wrath, which I think is probably my all-time favorite, which is the third book of the series. And yeah, I think it's definitely that's my favorite. But then we also have a God of Malice and then God of War, which I think are a joint second place. I actually think I rated God of Malice 5 stars as well, maybe 4.5 or 4. I actually can't remember. But God of Wrath, without a doubt, takes spot number 1, and then spot number 2 is God of Malice and God of War. Very sad to be leaving that universe, and I absolutely will be getting the physical copies to have on my shelf, because I probably would go back and read this series again another time. And now I know that Rena Kent has just released a new book called Beautiful Venom. It came out on the 27th of May, and I have ordered it, so cannot wait to read that. It is her first hockey romance, obviously still a dark romance. And although I feel like it could probably be a little bit of a similar plot to some of these books in the Legacy of God series, I'm still very much excited. So I will give an update on that once I have read it. So I have just realized a little bit of a mistake. I didn't go in with the Legacy of God series first in May. I actually continued the Windy City series by Liz Tumford. I don't know why I thought I read those books in April, but it's because I read Mile High as part of my April TBR. And then I ended up still having a couple of days left at the end of the month because I didn't read Divine Virals, which was part of the TBR. So I ended up having a couple of days, and then I wanted to get back into the Windy City series. So I read The Right Move at the end of April and then just wanted to continue the series. So actually, I read Caught Up and A Play Along by Liz Tumford as the first two books in May. So apologies for that. Obviously, we will quickly speak about them as well. I think the reason I forgot is because there was like a week there that was kind of like a fever dream, because my daughter was very sick. So I was at home with her and she did not want to sleep anywhere else besides on top of me. So I couldn't really do anything. So I literally just sat with her on the couch for a couple of days and read books. So these books I read quite quickly, which is probably why they just slipped my mind completely, which is a shame because these books are amazing. If you haven't read the Windy City series, I absolutely recommend them because they are amazing. So first, I read Caught Up, which is the third book of the Windy City series. And just before this, I did read The Right Move, but I read that in April. So we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to start by talking about Caught Up, which is the third book, like I said. And this is Kai and Miller's book. So it is a single daddy nanny trope sort of thing. And boss's daughter as well. And I loved this book. I think this is probably no, to be honest, I think a lot of people have different favorites because all the books are so good. But I know that a lot of people has this one as their favorite, and it absolutely is one of my favorites as well. I think I'm going to speak about that after I speak about these two, what my overall ratings were. But Caught Up, I gave it 5 stars. And there's not much to say, to be honest. He's obviously a single daddy. He plays, what does he play? Baseball? I think it's baseball. I'm not very good with these American sports, by the way, but I think it's baseball. And obviously he wants to bring his son with him on the road, but he can't watch him while playing. So he's constantly in and out with nannies, and then from his team will help watch the kid. But then his boss, Monty, offers to have his daughter, who is like this superstar dessert chef. She quits a job basically. So she's back to spend some time with her dad, and he offers on her behalf for her to watch the kid on tour with them. So that happens. And then obviously she gets along really well with the child and she looks after him really well. She has a bit of a bad mouth, so she's not afraid to stand up to Kai when he has some things to say. And so their relationship is very much a bit of banter and back and forth with each other in the beginning, but obviously then they start to grow attached to each other and that whole thing evolves, as you can probably imagine. And then she needs to go back to work in a different city because she's always been doing this, like moving around and never really staying in one place at a time. So she ends up going, and then obviously they end up with a happy ending as well. So I feel like I haven't spoiled too much because you can always kind of figure out what's going to happen in these type of romance books. But I very much enjoyed this. I loved Miller. I loved Kai as well, obviously, and their relationship, and also their relationship as a family. But Miller was a badass. So 5 stars. And then obviously Play Along I read just after, which is the fourth book. And at this point, we did not have Rewinded Back out, which is the fifth and final book of the series. It came out on the 20th of May, and I have yet to read that one, but I am super excited because I love Rio. So, very excited to read that. But I did read Play Along, which is, like I said, the fourth book in the Windy City series. And this one follows Isaiah, which is Kai's younger brother. And then it follows Kennedy, which is the. What is she? Is she like a physio? She's like, she works on the team for the baseball team as like a physio. I think that's the word. Anyways, I think this might be my favorite. I ended up rating this 5 stars as well, shock. But I think if I could have, I would have rated it 6 stars. I just absolutely loved the whole plot line with Isaiah and Kennedy and the fake marriage and her sort of being from like a higher upper class and with grave expectations, and him just being a goofball and a sucker for her, but still his own person. So I don't know, there was just something about their story together that I very much enjoyed, and I ate this up. I think I read it in one day because it was so good. I couldn't put it down. I actually ended up feeling like that with all 4 books, and I am expecting that I am going to be feeling the same about the fifth book. So overall, I think I rated Mile High. I rated it 4 or 4.5 stars. And even though people say to skip the first one, I would never do that. And I think considering I went into it with not any high expectations because people were talking so badly about this book, it was a complete different thing for me. I loved the book. Yeah, okay, it was a little bit long for what it was, but it was still very, very good. And so I ended up rating that quite high. But my favorites, like on the same level, are the next 3 books. So The Right Move, Caught Up, and Play Along. Even though I will say Play Along just tops it with like just a tiny little bit more for me. But I did rate those 3 5 stars. And I can't remember the last time I ended up rating a full series that high. I think I did maybe with the Gold Rush Rant series by Elsie Silver, because I love that whole series as well. But I definitely didn't expect to love this series as much as I did. So I was very, very pleased, and I'm very excited to read Rewinded Back. I will be reading it in June. So very excited, and also very sad that that series is coming to an end. I know there is a shorter novella coming out with Monty and Reese, which I absolutely will be reading as well. But I wish there was more. The next book I read was Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas, which is a standalone and a very fun read if you're into this genre. So it follows Jordan, which is our FMC, who's what? She's just turned, does she turn 18 or 19? I can't even remember, but she's very young, and she goes to the movies after she finishes her shift at a bar on her birthday, and she's got, I can't even remember if it's donuts to like celebrate. And she was meant to be picked up by her boyfriend, but she's waiting for him to come and get her. And so she goes to watch a movie, and in the movie theater she sees her ex-boyfriend, which was abusive, and so she tries to avoid running into him, and she spills her wine, which her colleague gave her as like a birthday present, and it ends up getting her close to this man that sits a couple of rows or lines away from her. And so I can't remember if the wine spills on him or by him or whatever, but she goes over there, and she apologizes for it, and he smells that it's wine, and he's like, what the and so she explains that it's her birthday, and they end up sitting together and just having a little conversation while watching the movie. And she can tell that he's older, but he looks very nice. And yeah, and when they come out of the the movie theater, they basically go their own ways, but then she calls her boyfriend and she says his name, Cole. And obviously the man hears this, and so he asks Cole Lawson, and she's like, "Do you know him?" And then he's like, "I'm Pike Lawson, his dad." So yeah, so that's the beginning. And then she ends up moving in together with her boyfriend. They move into his dad's house, which is Pike. And obviously they had a moment in this movie theater, so there's a bit of strange, awkward tension there. But at the same time, she's very much with her boyfriend and they're figuring things out, and she's not really happy with the way that he is in some ways. But so she lives there and she does what needs to be done on their behalf in the house. And obviously the dad, he goes to work, she goes to work, Cole is a little bit of a mess, and so they argue sometimes, and he's got a very strange relationship with his dad because the mum lies, and it's messy, but it's good. And obviously the boyfriend, something ends up happening between Jordan and her boyfriend that does so that he moves out to give her space, so she stays living with the dad, and things starts happening between them, and they end up starting like a relationship, but like under so that no one knows, basically. And yeah, and then stuff happens, and it's just a really good book, and I had a lot of fun reading it. It's not for everyone, that's for sure, and I do think it is disturbing for some people, for first of all the age gap, but the fact that she's so young as she is. Penelope Douglas books do tend to be around girls that are like only just 18. So I can see how that won't be something for everyone. However, I know it's fiction and I think it's a silly fun time. So I don't really mind it. And I did end up rating this 4 stars, and I just thought it was a fun read, to be honest. So it was a nice palate cleanser, and I mean, I love Penelope Douglas and her writing, so I will continue to read her books. Moving on to the next book that I read, which is one I have in a physical copy. It is This Monster of Mine. This one is the Fairloot edition, and it was the Fairloot adult book for, I think it was from April. And I rated this 4 stars as well. It was really, really good. It was not what I expected. I do have this book included in a reading vlog in the next video that is going to be coming out, which is me testing different book subscriptions. So this book, or this video, is going to be me testing the Fairloot adult book subscription. And I am reading this in that video, and I am updating you along the journey of what I think of the book and also my final rating and thoughts of the book. So I'm not going to go too much into detail in this video. If you want to see my opinion of this, then make sure you watch my next video. But this basically is it's a very mature book, I would say, because the writing is very mature and the author uses language that I feel like not everyone is going to understand. It was at times a little bit difficult for me purely because English is not my first language. But this is her debut novel, and I am so impressed. Not everyone can write like this, and I felt like she just executed so well, and the plot was amazing and the characters were really, really good. There was one thing that dragged it down a little bit for me, and that was simply the connection between our two main characters once they finally got together. It is a slow burn, there is a lot of yearning and tension, and the romance is not the main plot. But I just felt like with all that yearning and the way that they were with each other, I felt like it was just not really, the way the scene was described when they did get together just didn't really make sense to me in the way of how the rest had been described, basically. But that's a minor thing. I still very much enjoyed it, and I still very much enjoy the relationship between the two, and the fact that they're kind of together makes me happy. And I'm very excited for the following book to come out next year and to be reading that as well. So this one was really good, and if you haven't read it, you should go read it. Now, the next book that I read is also a physical copy, and I ordered this so quick when I saw this cover. It is a very popular book at the moment, like the whole series is very popular, but with different covers. And I ordered this cover. It is Face Off by Chelsea Curto, I think her name is. Yeah. And I really like this cover. It's a bit more discreet, and not always do I like when there's like characters on the cover. But I mean, sometimes I don't mind it, but I knew I wanted to bring this with me on my trip to Denmark when I went for the World Cup in ice hockey. And this is a hockey romance, so what better time to read it, right? Unfortunately, I did not like this book. And I'm so confused because it's such a very well loved book and everyone is raving about it and how good it is. And I just did not see it. And I don't know if it was because, like, I've already read quite a lot of hockey romances and how different can you really make them. But this is about our FMC and our MMC skates on the same team for in the NHL, basically. And I didn't mind that. And I did like the beginning, but there were pointers that I just disliked throughout the book. For starters, it was very insta love, and I did not like that. It was very insta love, except for in the beginning, and I very much loved the beginning. It was cringe, it was cheesy, and when I got to 80%, I literally skimmed the rest because I just couldn't deal with how cheesy it was. Second of all, the nicknames were obnoxious. And I'm not trying to be mean, but I really dislike them. He calls her Emmy Girl. No. And she calls him Pretty Boy. And maybe this is just me personally, but when I was a teenager, Pretty Boy was a term used to describe a guy that would self tan to the point of looking orange, wear skinny jeans, and pluck his eyebrows. So that was the image that entered my head every time I heard this nickname. And I'm pretty sure that is not what the author had in mind for that nickname. So yeah, I just could not get on board with this book, unfortunately. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, I'm not going to continue the series, but I do feel like I want to give it a chance because it's so loved and perhaps I could enjoy the other books. But I don't know. I just felt like the writing was good, don't get me wrong, but it was just cheesy. And I don't know if it's going to be like that in the other books as well. So maybe I'll probably continue it, but absolutely not right now. So yeah, 1.5 stars, unfortunately. The last book that I read in May, I have literally just finished yesterday, and it is On the Rocks by Candy Steiner. If you don't know, Candy Steiner is one of my absolute favorite authors. She is the author that wrote A Love Letter to Whiskey, which is one of my all-time favorite God tier books. And I do have some of her other books on my shelf behind me, which is also a hockey romance series that I have yet to read. But the books that I have read by her, so I've read A Love Letter to Whiskey and I've read another book called Make Me Hate You, and I've absolutely loved both of them. So I thought, okay, let's read another one. And it just so happened to be that she posted on a story that On the Rocks was available for free on Kindle Unlimited for a limited amount of time, I think like one day. So I ran to Kindle Unlimited and downloaded the book onto my Kindle. And I read this book in 2 days. It was so good. It is the first book in the Becker Brothers series, and it follows Noah as the Becker brother, and then it follows Ruby Grace, I think her name is Ruby Grace, if I'm not mistaken, she's 19, so this is an age gap as well. I think he's 28 and she's 19. And she is engaged to her boyfriend, who is 25 maybe, who she met in college or university. And her dad is the mayor of the city where they're from. It's in Tennessee. And she's from a very prim and proper family. And she's expected to basically become her mum and be like a mayor's wife or a potential one day president wife. So her boyfriend is in politics and they are meant to get married in 6 weeks. And so she's got a lot of pressure on her to make this wedding amazing. And so she's under a lot of pressure from her mum, but also from a lot of other people. And she is left alone to deal with all of this wedding preparation while he runs a campaign in a different state with his dad. And so she comes back to her hometown to do this, where her best friend Annie lives and also her family, obviously. But she volunteers at a nursing home where she gets along really well with all the elders, and she's got especially one woman there called Betty that she loves. And basically, our story takes place from Noah's point of view, which is the MMC. He's, like I said, one of the Becker brothers. He's lived there his entire life and he works at a distillery where his granddad helped build this distillery, but it ended up being taken away from his side of the family to be run by the other family that built it as well. And his dad tried to do something about the way this distillery was going, whereas the owners now, which is the other family, did not want to hear anything about it. And so unfortunately Noah's dad ends up dying in a fire at the distillery, and everyone is saying how it was an accident. He was smoking and this is what caused the fire, but he didn't smoke. So Noah's family is very sure that he was murdered, but they can't prove it. And yeah, and that is part of the plot line, but it's not like we get an ending to that story. So I think that will be resolved in one of the other brothers' books. But anyways, this story takes place in the distillery in the beginning, where we meet Noah. He's a very flirty man and he likes women and, all of that jazz. And he has to basically show a client some of their barrels because she's planning on buying a barrel for her fiance as his wedding gift. And obviously it is Ruby Grace that's coming. So he's the one that needs to present these barrels to her so that she can choose which one to get for her fiance. And obviously this is where they meet, and he thinks she's prim and proper and a very like a princess, and so he makes fun of her a little bit, but she talks back, and they actually end up getting along quite well. And so this is where the story starts, but then a lot of things continue to happen, and they end up spending quite a lot of time because he is immediately intrigued by her, and she has always had a crush on him ever since they went to church as when she was 9 and he was 18 probably. So she's always had a crush on him, and that doesn't seem to have disappeared. And a lot of stuff happens, and she ends up wanting to call off the wedding, but because of some family issues, she can't. And so she's too scared to say this as the reason to Noah. So she just tells him that they just can't. And so that's where they kind of get split up. And then he finds out the real reason as to why she's deciding to go through the wedding. And he goes to the wedding, and you are being put through some angsty feelings and some sad feelings before it becomes a happy ending. But it is such a good book, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the books in this series. There are 4 brothers, and we get 4 books, so I will be reading all of them. By the way, I ended up rating this 4 stars. I do feel like it wasn't as good as A Love Letter to Whiskey, but it was still very, very good. So that was my reading wrap up for May. A very, very good reading month, I will say. Most of these were 4-star reads, and I did have a couple of 5-star reads as well. And obviously I did have one 1.5-star read. Let me know if you've read any of these books and if you felt different about them from what I did. And let me know what books you think I should read in June. I do have a couple of videos planned, so I will be reading some specific books for these type of videos. But I think other than that, I will be mood reading, and I have a couple new releases that I want to get to that came out in May. So I'm excited. It's finally summer, and I'm so excited to read the books I have planned. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you will be following along for any of the coming videos I've got on the way. If you do, then please don't forget to subscribe, and you can also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Goodreads. I will link that in the description box. And until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you soon. Bye!